Welcome to the Convergence Podcast. I'm your host, Ashok Shivanan.
We consider servicing kind of this world of edge cases. There really is no happy path. Every consumer is very different. Every property is very different. Microservice architecture provides that flexibility within a platform ecosystem.
On this show, we'll deconstruct the best practices, principles, and the underlying philosophies behind the most engaged product teams who ship the most successful products. This is what teams are made of. Welcome back, folks. On this episode, I get to speak with Erica Sands, a Senior Director of Product Management at Sagent Financial, a cloud-based mortgage servicing platform. We get to talk about the intricacies and challenges that financial services firms, Sagent's customers, go through when it comes to moving off of their mainframe onto more modern software, ideally creating a platform for experimentation so that the lines of business can bring new products really quickly to their customers. We get to talk about a lot of the challenges associated with going from single or multi-products into a platform, as well as the opportunities that Erica sees with a global workforce and really highly optimized product teams. We get to hear about Erica's journey from working on the front lines of the business, an expert in mortgage, to being an expert and leading product teams despite not having as much of a technical background. There's a lot of tips and tricks there for folks who moved into product without necessarily having been in a technical background. I personally had a lot of fun nerding out about product as well as mainframe modernization with Erica. I hope you enjoy the show. Subscribe to the podcast to get future episodes as soon as they're published. If you find this helpful, give the podcast a 5-star rating on your podcast app or hit that like button on YouTube. Tell us a little bit about Sagent. Tell us who it is that y'all serve and what kind of problems you solve.
Yeah. So Sagent powers banks and lenders to make loans and homeownership simpler and safer for consumers. We really are bringing the modern experience for customers that they've expected from loan originations into loan servicing. And our products allow our clients to curate that lifetime management of the customer relationship through the term of their loan. And that kind of allows them to use our platform to service loans at a lower cost, scale their compliance, and provide higher servicing values through their full market cycle.
Cool. And then help me out with some of these terms like loan origination and loan servicing for someone that hasn't worked in the financial services industry as deeply as you have.
Yep. So loan originations is the process of you either buying, refinancing, or taking out a HELOC. So that kind of very small part of your loan term where you're getting the loan and closing on it. Loan servicing is that whole 15 to 30-year term after you've bought your house, refinanced your house, or taken out a HELOC, where a servicer is managing your loan payments, anything that could happen related to your property, anytime you maybe default or a special situation like that. So loan originations is getting the loan, and then loan servicing is that whole lifetime after once you're paying back the loan that you've taken out.
Got it. And so as a consumer, a lot more of my relationship with the lender happens during that loan servicing time. And I think I probably speak for a lot of folks who have loans that things are a lot more shiny and cool and modern on the origination side. But once I'm locked in, it feels like I have to log into a different website that was built maybe 15 or more years ago. And it sounds like that's the space that y'all are focused on modernizing. Is that right?
Absolutely. There's been a lot of investment in the loan origination space recently, just because we've been on that upward tick of the cycle where there's been a lot more origination with the lower interest rates. And our focus is now, as we kind of even out and get into that valley, what does the customer relationship and experience look like when you're actually servicing someone's loan and they're having to have that relationship long term?
Got it. And so when it comes to modernizing, what does that look like on the consumer level or on the front end? And then maybe after that, tell me also, what's all the magic that y'all have to do on the back end with respect to making it all look nice and modern on the front end?
Yeah, there's a lot of things you can kind of do on the front end, even when you have older tech or mainframe systems that make a beautiful user experience in UI. But the real change happens for the industry when people start moving away from the monolithic mainframe and more into microservices based architecture. And that all gives them scalability and flexibility in the products that you're providing. So it's not just this pretty front end with maybe a 50, 60-year-old mainframe backend, being able to provide that scalability and recreate the whole thing in a digital transformation.
Totally. I've known companies who are trying to get off their mainframe for decades and make some level of progress, but it's really hard to actually turn it off. And I
Yes.
think there's a lot of good reasons. And you mentioned scalability, flexibility. I've heard the term creating a platform for experimentation so that you can try new things in terms of how you service your customers. So what are some things that come to mind for you if we wave the magic wand and we're beyond in the post mainframe era? As a product person or on behalf of your consumers, what are some things that you think are around the horizon for you or things that you're servicing today?
I think that the flexibility is the key. So we consider servicing kind of this world of edge cases. There really is no happy path. Every consumer is very different. Every property is very different. So microservice architecture provides that flexibility within a platform ecosystem to really be able to curate the user experience, both for those servicing the loan and the consumers who have the loan, by being able to change out kind of what we've coined as service modules. So those microservices are able to be kind of created in a way that fits a specific client's portfolio.
And I think this term platform is used a lot.
Yes.
And I've started to wonder sometimes what kind of questions I would ask when determining, hey, is this really a platform? Is it more of a product? And where do I personally draw these arbitrary lines, and maybe where does the industry draw them? So tell me about that journey in terms of the roadmap to a platform. Did it start out with single applications? How did that all go at Sagent?
I think people definitely confuse the two, like a platform as your single application and maybe all the components of it that are required from like a DevOps perspective, a product perspective, a user experience perspective. But the word platform is meant to mean kind of that ecosystem of applications that support each other. And we've really thought through what specific applications support the whole servicing experience. So that's like a core application that helps manage money, those transactional payments. Obviously, people are paying back their loan. A consumer experience, so that front end that we talked about, where the consumer is logging in to pay their loan, check their escrow account balance, maybe request some type of assistance if they've lost their job or had some type of hardship. And then other kind of components as relate to the servicing. So data management, the servicing industry is very focused on the data of a portfolio, and not just for managing the performance of people paying back their loan, but also for retention of customers. We're in a market where nobody wants to get a new first lien because of interest rates. So it really is all of those single use applications that come together as a platform for a holistic user journey that is the sum of its parts.
That's always a challenge, a very worthwhile to solve challenge, I think, in terms of being pretty opinionated in terms of what goes in the platform and what's maybe not meant for the platform, saying, hey, that's something that we're counting on our end users to build on top of the platform, or that's something we're going to do custom depending on what the client's wanting to do, versus, hey, no, this is going to be core platform. This is part of the vision, the strategy. We're envisioning what this next application that someone's going to build is, and we're in service of that. So how did y'all go about determining what goes in and what maybe doesn't go in today or ever?
Yeah, that's definitely the challenge when you have a B2B product and you're building for a multitude of clients. They each have their own business processes, their own customer profiles. And how do you really get to one unified experience that will meet the basic of their needs? And like, as you said, they can build on additional tech that provides those detailed user experiences that they do want. So that's definitely something we've thought of how do we get to this core group of things that need to be in the experience, and then coach clients on how they can add to that or configure it. I think one of the things that platforms have been doing lately is making configurability an option. So there's a standard out of the box way that it works, and then configurability can either be purchased or added on to depending on how deep their technology department is at their specific company.
The diversity of clients there and the problems that they have are kind of, I would guess, the core of those. And so segmenting is one of the approaches that we've taken in the past. So who are the types of customers that are maybe top of that priority list or the core focus for y'all?
I think the relationships we have with our customers is kind of related to their portfolio makeup and their portfolio size. So
Okay.
obviously, people who are servicing a larger amount of loans have a larger amount of requests in the way that the system should work, versus smaller servicing shops or independent mortgage banks may have a very specific niche type of loan that they service. So it's definitely a kind of the prioritization game of, is this one client who's kind of a larger client that wants something the priority, or can we ship a feature that helps the majority of clients, and really address multiple problems? So it's always that kind of looking at the whole situation, and what benefits not just the clients using the system, but the direction we want to go with the platform product as well.
That makes a ton of sense. And are there any stories that come to mind for you that have helped you with feeling confident around that prioritization? It's there's always some level of uncertainty around it.
Yeah. I think one of the most common issues that we get is everyone has a different idea or interpretation of a lot of the compliance regulations and how that should be approached in the system. So you kind of have to find this path of interpretation that meets the needs of everyone and still follows within the regulation. And being able to identify the feature and the way it works that meets the need of the regulation, but may not meet what the client interprets it,
Mm.
has been one of the biggest challenges. Is not everybody's going to look at a CFPB regulation and interpret it the same, and that's just the nature of how they've been written. So finding that interpretation that is what the system should do versus what you should do as a business has been that kind of gray area that we navigate quite often.
So you're creating a more explicit interpretation of the regulations and then having that be the basis for what you're encoding into the platform.
Right. What's the exact kind of hard line that you could code into the system, to make the product compliant, versus what does a service or company want to do to kind of make themselves compliant within their business processes.
Fostering an engaged product organization and aligning them with the principles around lean, human-centered design, and agile will more than likely lead to successful business outcomes for your organization. But getting started or getting unblocked can be hard. This podcast is brought to you by the player coaches over at Integral. They help ambitious companies like you build amazing product teams and ship products in artificial intelligence, cloud, web, and mobile. Listeners to the podcast can head on over to integral.io/convergence and get a free product success lab. During this session, the Integral team will facilitate a problem-solving exercise that gives you clarity and confidence to solve a product design or engineering problem. That's integral.io/convergence. Now, back to the show. These regulations, as you've mentioned, are really complex. I imagine they change from state to state, maybe even county to county, depending on the state. And as a product person, you probably have to be pretty well versed in regulation, how they change. And in your case, I think you came from the industry, right? I went into product from a technical role. So tell me about how you came to being a product manager, and then we'll get into how that maybe helps with really complex regulation compliance that you work under.
So I spent the early part of my career in mortgage originations and then third-party diligence, mostly supporting mortgage-backed securitizations. And then during the market crash, doing forensic litigation for mortgage-backed securities. The company I worked for in third-party diligence built their own proprietary application for loan reviews because it's such a niche kind of specific thing. There wasn't an application that existed to perform their reviews. So they built one in-house. I'd been there, I think, about 9 or 10 years when a product development specialist role opened up. So I applied for it. I had worked with the hiring manager and that team directly on quite a few projects over the years. And that was my first step into product development from the line of business. And I just fell in love with the ability to directly impact and create an experience inside the app that improved efficiency for the business, the internal stakeholders, and then therefore our customers that we served. From there, pretty much like everyone, the pandemic caused me to reevaluate my life and career goals. And I wanted to focus less on internal business stakeholders and really go into direct to consumer product development. So I enrolled in the product school certificate, which is, I think back then it was like a 6 or 8 week course with a cohort. The one thing I learned in the course is that I potentially had a touch of imposter syndrome because I didn't learn anything new in the course. I had done a lot of things as part of my role as product development specialist and in the line of business that were transferable skills into product management frameworks. My cohort instructor was a really great mentor for learning both the certificate material and preparing for interviews. And that certificate is kind of what launched me into applying for other more direct to consumer product development roles and what landed me at Figure Lending. I came on board to help build their mortgage products, which were shelved because of the market turn. And then I transitioned my focus to their lending ecosystem applications, which supported their Figure HELOC originated on blockchain. And that included DART, portfolio manager, and servicing. And then I was laid off in July 2023 from Figure, which is how I landed at Sagent, and now get to focus wholly on mortgage servicing and the future of mortgage servicing in a cloud-based microservice architecture.
Many of us can be subject to that imposter syndrome, and getting to work around peers and also having a little bit more of a structured learning mechanism like product school might be a good way to kind of see how much of it is imposter syndrome and what there may actually be to learn or not. I'm curious, so if you think back at the folks that you worked alongside in the loan origination space, what do you think were some things that were different about you that set you up so well to be a product manager or work in product development versus some of the others? And I'm asking this on behalf of folks who are maybe working on the line of business that are curious about whether or not they should go into product.
Yeah. I think the core difference in the ability that kind of gets you to step from the line of business to product management is having that solution oriented mindset and basically kind of being obsessed with problem solving and creating the best user experience. And when you're in the line of business, whatever your domain is, you have a user, whether it's your client, whether it's an internal stakeholder, you always have someone that you're trying to solve the problem for, and really focusing on developing that mindset and those skills around consistently asking the but why question, which is so popular in product management, is what will help you transfer from being in the line of business to actual product management and development and working with those tech teams to then be able to enact change and solve the problems in the systems that people are using rather than just through manual business processes.
And had you worked closely with tech teams when you're in loan origination, or was that new to you as you transitioned over?
I had worked pretty closely. So because they were building their proprietary internal application, they used a lot of us to do that user research and feedback. Cool. I understand that's probably not the experience for everyone, that usually those are very separated for the people in operations versus those doing development and technology. But I definitely had the opportunity to create those relationships and make that transition much easier. And I do think trying to make that transition at a place you're currently at versus trying to go somewhere new and show that you're able to make that transition is a better opportunity.
That's also a really great nugget. If you're looking to do that transition, doing it at a place where you already fit pretty well into the culture and norms and you've established trust allows probably folks to take a little bit of a chance on you that they may not if they didn't know who you were, right?
Yeah, I'd agree. You already have the domain expertise. You already have the rapport with those colleagues. So it's a lot easier to kind of make the case that you just need to learn a few product things for the role than trying to start over at a new company to learn new culture norms, learn how they work, potentially learn a new domain. So I would definitely say anyone who's looking to transition into product from the line of business, look internally first.
Any advice for folks coming from the line of business that didn't maybe go to a tech school or have direct tech experience around how to best collaborate with tech folks and earn influence and trust there?
Oh, good question. I think that's potentially where you have to network outside your company and learn some skills or how they work without directly interacting with your colleagues. LinkedIn is a great resource for free resources and being able to reach out to people. I found that a lot of people are willing to get on the phone and have a conversation with you, even if you're a complete stranger, and kind of impart that knowledge and share some of their nuggets of truth that have helped them. And I definitely have leveraged LinkedIn over the past 2 years, not just for career development, but to be able to find people who are different than me and work differently than me and look differently than me to get that perspective and help me do my job better, and be a better product manager.
That's amazing. And I agree. I think I had that challenge myself, thinking or making assumptions that no one would want to help out a stranger. And I think sitting on the other side now, where I do get requests for advice or to hop on a coaching call now and then, I find it really refreshing compared to, frankly, a lot of folks selling stuff or, cold jumping directly to sales amongst the LinkedIn messages. So I think asking for advice or asking for a soundboard is definitely a super great nugget. Anything specific in your approach, do you think, that helps you get more responses there?
I think you have to make it very clear you don't want something from them other than a conversation. So when I was laid off last year, there was a lot of conversations I had with network connections that while I was looking for a job, most of the conversations I had with people was more about advice on how to take the next step. Like, being laid off is a shocking and emotional thing to happen to you. So a lot of the acquaintance connections will say that I made, and those conversations that I had were more about how do I hone in on what I want to do next? How do I deal with the shock of being laid off at this place that I really loved working? And just making it clear to them that I didn't expect them to hire me or provide me this great path forward, but I was just looking for insight and perspective, and their knowledge share really takes the pressure off of them saying yes to a conversation. If they know they don't owe you anything from the conversation, it makes it a lot easier for you to approach people.
In addition to the advice, did it also lead to any networking opportunities or any of the jobs that you ended up landing?
Oh, definitely. So every interview that I had was someone that was a network connection. And it was either with their company or with someone they knew because we had created that rapport together. And I actually landed at Sagent because of one of those relationships. I had known Uday, who's our CTO at Sagent, from my time at Figure. And he kind of reached out and said, would you like to consider coming to Sagent? And now I'm here getting to be part of this amazing project.
That's awesome. I think I'd heard this from sort of startup fundraising way back, where they said, if you want advice, ask for funding. If you want funding, ask for advice. And it's very similar for building your network or for finding your next role as well. Well, let's switch hats just a little bit to now you are in a role where you are hiring product managers and training and enabling a team, right?
Right.
And so what are some things, we've all had relatively unique transition paths to get into product roles. And I think that shows up for me when I'm interviewing product managers, where there isn't a specific path that we tend to look for. And especially as a consultancy, for us, we want a little bit more of a diverse skill set. And I imagine in your case, it's similar, where PMs that you're hiring come from different backgrounds. Do you have any biases or weaknesses? Maybe in my case, if someone's worked in lean manufacturing, I tend to want to at least have a chat with them because they tend to understand theory of constraints and system thinking and other things like that. Everyone's got a different bias. So I'm curious for you, is there anything that unique about yourself that pops out in a resume when you're evaluating candidates?
That's a really good question. So we have a unique perspective at Sagent because no one's ever rebuilt a servicing platform before. So we need people with domain expertise because you want people to be experts on the user journeys that you're trying to recreate, automate, and make more efficient. But you also need that product mindset where you're solution oriented, you're obsessed with the user experience. You understand some of the frameworks that help you work faster and ship products quickly. And we're also in the position where we're doing a 0 to 1 build. So that's a completely different mindset than most product managers out there who are potentially working on an existing application that they're just adding features to. when you're starting from scratch and you not only have to build the product from scratch, but also your team, your processes, how you handle documentation and testing, creating an implementation plan for this new product that's in flight. So I think the thing that I focus most on is someone's ability to adapt to change quickly. We constantly pivot. We're constantly finding the next items on the critical path to delivery. And it really is mostly a lot of questions about mindset and behavioral questions, because the uniqueness of doing a 0 to 1 build and kind of almost acting like a startup within a larger company requires a specific type of product manager who's able to be a self-starter, who's able to take these very nebulous instructions and put them into kind of like a plan and deliver. So I realized I didn't give you like a specific thing because it really is kind of talking to someone and see if they understand the basics of product frameworks, if they have a little bit of domain expertise, and if they're able to take very limited direction and just kind of run with it and make things happen.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way to think about it. And also love that there is definitely that delineation between PMs who can thrive in the 0 to 1 and ones who are better optimized for the 1 to 100. And, working in the wrong one can seem really chaotic or really boring if you're placed in the wrong role. I've certainly been there myself, and interviewing for that makes a ton of sense. And, you're looking for folks who can go 0 to 1, ideally can also have familiarity like you do with the lending space and regulations and the industry side, and also mainframe modernization. Those are at least three of maybe more check boxes that makes that ideal candidate for you. What are some things that you found yourself realizing that you can train folks for and not train folks for?
You can train folks to work in any type of like Scrum, Agile, kind of those frameworks of how you do things or how you project plan. That's one of the things that I think pretty much anybody can learn ways of working. And that's one of the things that we're willing to, if they're more junior in those skills, look over versus the specific product mindset. Have you ever done digital transformation from mainframe to microservices or APIs? And then having that servicing domain expertise.
What are your favorite ways for your team to send them for that training on things that they can get better at and you're willing to take a chance on? Is it in-house? Is there external resources? Is mentorship? What do you tend to use as your toolkit there?
Well, I have an excellent partner who is our program manager. So he provides a lot of mentorship opportunities. We've also previously, prior to me coming onto the project, they brought Scrum Bob in. So the whole program got to learn from him directly and implement those processes. And then we do also have training and development opportunities, both internally through one of our human resources apps, and then a stipend that we provide people if they would want to take external classes for any of those frameworks or anything that kind of relates to their career at Sagent to help them grow in those skills.
Cool. And any of those come to mind as being particularly good or delightful that you would recommend?
Not related to project planning, but as a graduate of product school, I pretty much recommend them to everyone who will listen, especially because they're one of the best free content resources. They have those micro certifications that cover, I think, like product strategy, product growth, a myriad of different ways to manage products, in addition to their paid course certificates.
Either at work or at home, what is a recent product that you used that just kind of blew your socks off or you were just really delighted by?
So I actually have two favorites, and they're for two different reasons. So Noom, which is kind of like the health and weight loss app, has probably one of the best onboarding funnels I've ever seen. As someone who's in product, you can tell that they've really found ways to keep the user engaged while they're calling their APIs to get data and process information. And it's a pretty lengthy onboarding funnel because they're asking a lot of details about you. They make it in a way that you're going to make it all the way through because of the engagement, because of how they do some of their loading screens. So they're my favorite onboarding experience. And I think part of what makes it so great is that they've leveraged psychology to create their onboarding experience in their app. They use something called cognitive behavioral therapy. And then my other favorite kind of overall app is Spotify. And it's kind of funny because who would think that millennials who were creating mixtape CDs and didn't want to listen to the radio and wanted our own specific playlist are now just letting this app kind of curate playlists for us and recommend songs. But for the same reason that I like the onboarding funnel, their app is constantly engaging for the user in ways that other music streaming services aren't. They're telling you when new albums come out. They're recommending new playlists based on what you're listening to. And it's a really great user experience. And I like both of those for the different reasons.
That's awesome. I will have to check out Noom and the onboarding flow. Definitely agree with Spotify. It is surprising if I went back 15 years and told a younger self that I would be paying a monthly subscription and allowing someone else to choose what music I was listening to. That would be very hard to believe. I also just happened to be at a concert last night. I got a last minute invite from a friend, and he said that he listened to a recommended artist for 20 minutes before deciding to buy a ticket in app. So I'm really curious to see how Spotify might give Ticketmaster a run for their money and try to chip after that monopoly that Ticketmaster has there.
Yeah, they're definitely curating not just to what you listen to, but also that artist listener experience. Because they have the emails where it's like this artist specifically created this for you, or like you get access to exclusive merch. So they're doing a lot of really cool things in the music space, and that would be awesome if they give Ticketmaster a competition.
Was there anything else that you wanted to share with folks in the lending space, thinking about modernizing their back-end systems or coming to work in the lending space?
I think one of the things that makes it challenging in that modernization process is most companies are focused on operations. So they're focused on originating, selling, or servicing loans. So there's this constant comparison of the cost associated with continuing to do things manually or partially manually with a system versus investing in the tech for automation and efficiency. And I think this is where utilization of testing assumptions and data becomes critically important, not only for those within the company, but as a product manager. How are you actually solving someone's problem to make them make that switch from I do this manually or partially manually and it works fine, my profit margins are fine, versus showing them how automation using workflow creates that efficiency that could widen that gap for them and allow them to open up and do other things with that time by using the right tech.
Yep, that's an awesome insight. Well, I want to say thank you so much for your time. That's a lot of great insights on transitioning career into product, enabling PMs, and also a great window into what things look like behind the scenes in the lending space. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me and having me on.
Thank you for joining me on the Convergence Podcast today. Subscribe to the Convergence Podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your content. If you're listening and found this helpful, please give us a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button and tell me what you think about what you heard today.